bass cannon kicking.
Onimusha! Yes, okay, the game picks for these Christmas specials have always been rather tenuous in terms of relevance, but after putting so much time into playing the very recent Bayonetta 2, I felt it would be interesting to jump all the way back to an old action game on the PS2, one that even predates the mighty Devil May Cry. In fact, it's said that the mechanics that allowed players to launch enemies into the air in Devil May Cry was inspired by a glitch found during Onimusha's development, in which enemies could be kept suspended by repeatedly slashing them. What a piece of history. Unlike most pieces of history over in the UK, it's another title that I'm forced to experience at a glorious 50 Hz. Though, since Hyperbit Hero captured the footage for this video, you won't have to witness my pain seeing the game run slower than it should. Onimusha is set in feudal Japan and involves the real-life warlord Oda Nobunaga coming back to life to reap hell with his army of demons. I just love this. A historical figure is brought back to life as a freaking killer ghost, but since we're dealing with a Japanese game, it's played completely straight. Like, what if other countries tried to do this? Oh shit, it's Lord Nelson and he's back from the dead with a horde of killer zombies! Hell, I'd play it. The game begins with the cousin of our hero Samanosuke getting kidnapped, so he and his ninja lady friend of course take off to save her.
I'll go north. You follow them through the other way.
Understand.
Sorry love, do you not mean understood by any chance? I mean, I love Jet Set Radio as much as the next guy. But you should probably read up a bit before you and the entirety of isolationist Japan decide to all start speaking English out of nowhere. Hey, I would have set the voices to Japanese, but since this isn't an option in the UK version for some reason, yet another argument not to buy games in my country, I'm forcing you all to hear these great performances with me.
No!
Oh, yes, it is indeed true. Now, let me show you my most recent creation.
As hack and slashers go, Onimusha's pretty old school. I mean, we're talking fixed camera tank controls only playable with the D-pad old school. This isn't really a big deal to me though. I think the fixed perspective lends the game a neat atmosphere, and while the combat is very rigid compared to titles today, I enjoy how this slower and more methodical style of play lends the fighting a little more weight. Blocking, attacking, and dodging, it all feels fairly grounded. The player is given time to think out their next move, which allows the combat to be more punishing. Each hit the enemy lands feels costly, keeping the player on their toes. Of course, it quickly becomes apparent that Onimusha isn't really as much a pure action game as it is Resident Evil with swords. You know how these days a lot of games made by Ubisoft follow this template where you navigate a sandbox looking for towers to climb then unlock parts of the overworld map? Well, back in the day, Capcom had their own template for a lot of their games. A formula of sorts that boiled down to going into rooms, pressing X on everything until you have an item that lets you unlock other rooms you can press X in. Even the Devil May Cry games used this formula, they just pretended not to by making mission screens appear every 10 minutes or so. Of course, this formula was used for a reason. It's addicting to explore every nook and cranny and feel like you've really conquered an environment by working your way through a maze that seemed daunting at first glance. One thing that sometimes occurred in games that used this kind of structure though is that it makes it real easy to just run past enemies to get from place to place. Onimusha doesn't have that problem because aside from getting XP from enemies to upgrade weapons, there are also certain doors that can't be unlocked without dumping XP into various keys, which meant I actually had to do some enemy grinding at points, which I definitely wasn't expecting. I tell you what though, it wasn't just the spooky enemies in titles with this setup that lent even games like Onimusha a sense of dread at times. Oh, you think the walk and look kind of horror games you get today are scary? I'll tell you about true fear. Playing a game where save points double as checkpoints and seeing none in sight after beating a boss bookended with unskippable cutscenes. To be honest, this doesn't happen that much in Onimusha, but try not to die because you'll be sent back to the title screen and there is no skipping the in-game cinemas. So then why does a neat little game like Onimusha, or the Onimusha series as a whole, not have an HD re-release like the DMC games, or at the very least a PSN port of some kind? Well, I'm just speculating, but I assume the reasoning might be twofold. One, it probably wouldn't be that easy to upscale some of these pre-rendered backgrounds, and two, these games actually feature a lot of real actors who lend both their voices and faces to some of the characters. And I assume Capcom isn't prepared to fork out the cash to pay these actors their royalties for any sort of re-release. Or try and half-arse it Konami style and redo the performances, which probably wouldn't work anyway because they went as far as to use their likenesses too. I mean, Jean Reno is in the third game. A time-traveling Jean Reno. Damn, I should probably get around to talking about the rest of this series. But this is a half-assed Christmas special, so I guess you're out of luck. For now. Ho 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 ho! Thanks for watching, and thanks for enduring my horrible phlegmy voice today. Shout out again to Hyperbit Hero for getting the footage for this special. Speaking of Hyper, our playthrough channel Bit and Brit is back on the go. We've started our new series on Killer is Dead, so feel free to check that out. As usual, you can find me on both Twitter and Facebook. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year.